Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Cheryl Carlisle and I'm the Chair of the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting, which is a multi-location meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and for those attending remotely to choose your language of choice. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. For those attending remotely, please use the raised hand function. We will alternate between speakers in the chamber and remote attendees. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility, so please draw your comments to our attention. Committee members who are attending remotely are required to leave their camera on throughout the debate and when voting in order to maintain the integrity of the decision-making process. If you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, pop a message in the chat function so the Democratic Services Officer is aware and let us know when you return. I expect everyone present and participating in this meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers and anyone in the public gallery. When I open up the debate to members, I will ask committee members to speak and put their questions first, followed by non-committee members. Whilst I do not wish to stifle debate, can I remind members that any questions should be focused on the subject matter and to avoid repetition. If I feel the length of individual speeches are negatively impacting on the overall time for discussion and becoming unmanageable, I will defer to the committee's rules of procedure, which limits the length of speeches to 5 minutes. I'd like to welcome Councillor Sharon Dolman, who's a new member of the committee. And here we're moving on to the agenda. Have we apologies for absence, please, Sally?
Yeah, apologies have been received from councillors Frank Bradfield, Nia Owen, Stephen Price and Andrew Wood, also Rhianab Gareth, the Chief Executive, and I've also been informed that Councillor Tristan Lewis will be joining us a bit later on.
Lovely, thank you, Sally. Item 2, declarations of interest. Have we any?
Just need some advice. I have a son-in-law who's retained
I think that is likely to be personal only. We've got a presentation here today, not a decision that directly affects the outcome. It's about questions of the presentation. So I think in the circumstances, it's personal only.
Thank you.
I would like to declare an interest. I've been appointed to the North Wales Fire and Rescue Authority. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's just chair for members of the fire authority. It will be a personal interest as under the code. It is another relevant authority, which means it only a personal interest arises.
Oh, Councillor Gareth, then Councillor Chris online.
Yeah, likewise, I declare a personal interest because I've just been appointed on to the board as well, but obviously here today as a councillor.
Pointed onto the board.
The fire authority.
Oh yeah, yes. Again, that's personal interest only, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Chris online.
Thank you, Chair. I want to declare the same personal interest as a member of the Fire and Rescue Authority.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Councillor Austin, ditto. Good man. Thank you. Anybody else? That's nearly the whole committee. Councillor Shaw.
Just for clarity, Conway is in my ward and it's one of the stations, and I have sought advice earlier today, and it's just personal. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, it's not an interest as such. I think it's a matter of transparency. It doesn't give rise to an interest in the code, but I think Councillor feels more comfortable to make that transparent and clear.
Thank you, Matt. Nobody else? Okay, members, we move on to item 5, presentation by representatives of North Wales Fire and Rescue Service on the consultation emergency cover review. Your fire and rescue service, right place, right time, right skills. We'd like to welcome this evening Assistant Chief Fire Officer Helen MacArthur and Assistant Chief Fire Officer Stuart Millington, who are going to give us a presentation. For members' information, we have invited them here this evening because we wanted to hear the consultation that they're doing the presentation, and we wrote to the Chief Fire Officer because, as you know, this committee had some serious concerns about the finances last year, and we said we would invite them here to talk through their presentation with us. So I'd like to warmly welcome you, and we will do questions at the end, members. So gather all your thoughts, get your questions in order for the end. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Noswaith pawb, Stuart Millington, Prif Swyddog Tan Cyfarfod efo Gwasanaeth Tan a Chacheb Gogledd Cymru Dwy. Good evening. I'm Stuart Millington, Assistant Chief Fire Officer with North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. Just a little bit about my background before I hand over to Helen to introduce herself. I joined the Fire and Rescue Service almost 30 years ago and worked for predominantly most of that time in North Wales. I've worked all over North Wales, from Wrexham to Llangefni and everywhere in between, I suppose, or lots of places in between anyway. And also spent a period of time away in Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service as well. So I came back to North Wales in 2014 and I've moved around the various references in senior positions, but I started my career riding fire engines. And over to Helen.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Helen MacArthur. I'm Assistant Chief Fire Officer and my reference is Finance and Resources. I've been with the fire and rescue sector now for just over 5.5 years, but actually started my public sector career in 1996, actually in this building. And I actually worked for what is now Audit Wales as the external auditors of Conway. And then I moved into the health sector. So I've worked in the public sector now for quite some time. So I'm really pleased to be able to be here this evening, and hopefully we can provide the information that you require.
Okay, so just before we play a video that explains the consultation and the operational response options that are currently being considered, I thought it'd be useful to provide a little bit of background. So across the UK, there are a number of operational duty systems in place that enable fire and rescue services to respond to emergency incidents. In North Wales, there are currently 3 different ways in which fire engines are crewed. These are stations that have firefighters physically on station for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, of which in North Wales there are 3, and they're in Wrexham, Deeside and Rhyl. And then there are stations where firefighters are on station during the daytime and respond from home or from a nearby address at night, of which North Wales has 5 of those stations, and they're Colwyn Bay, Llandudno, Bangor, Carnarvon and Holyhead. And then finally, there are stations whereby staff usually have other employment and respond to incidents via a pager. And when that call is received, they will leave their place of employment or they'll leave their home address to attend the fire station. Most stations in North Wales operate in this way, and we have 36 fire stations that are solely on-call fire stations, or also referred to as retained fire stations. But we also have on-call contingent in our hold-time stations as well. Hundreds of rural stations across the country operate in this way. We also have a number of full-time firefighters who don't have a permanent station, but are deployed to different locations each day in a bid to improve availability in those on-call stations. So we deploy them on a day-by-day basis in order to try to improve availability of our retained stations. The RDS, or on-call duty system, has been in operation for many years and was devised at a time when people lived and worked close enough to their local fire station for them to be released from work and respond to emergency calls during the day. Today, it's far more usual for people need to travel further distances for work, resulting in it becoming increasingly difficult to recruit and retain people who can provide availability during the daytime. Cover improves during the evenings when people return home from work. Whilst being the main contributor, working practices are not the only reason for availability challenges, and there are a complex set of issues, meaning that availability fluctuates on an almost hour-by-hour basis. Many things have been tried to improve on-call availability, but success is limited and very difficult to sustain. This problem is not specific to North Wales, as on-call availability is a constant challenge for fire and rescue services across the UK. In a bid to address this problem and to provide a fair and equitable response that we can be certain of during the daytime, we commissioned an emergency cover review. And the objective of this was to provide a data-driven review of risk in North Wales and to consider the optimal distribution of resources to manage these risks. Initial work began in February 2023, and representatives of the Fire and Rescue Authority, who are councillors who represent, as you know, each of the 6 unitary authorities, many of which are on this meeting tonight, considered the data in working group meetings that began in March. Throughout April, May and June, during a period of pre-consultation, these options were refined before being presented to a full authority meeting in July. It is the options that were agreed in the full fire authority meeting in July that we are now asking the public for their opinions on. And so now is the time I'd like to play the video, if that's possible. Thank you.
Welcome to our public consultation about the future of how we provide our emergency cover. What is our aim? We want to ensure we can continue to be there for you when you need us, no matter where you live or who you are, providing the fairest possible service to everyone. We aim to achieve this by managing our resources, our budget, and our people as effectively as possible. We've therefore been exploring how we can respond in the right place, at the right time, with the right skills. This means looking at how to improve existing cover whilst also recognising the current financial challenges. Understanding your views is key to this. Why do we need to change? Working with independent specialists, we've been modelling exactly how we could respond in the most effective and efficient way. This is how we currently operate. 44 fire stations, 3 whole-time 24-hour stations with staff on duty 24 hours a day working shifts. 5 day crewed stations with staff on duty between midday and 10 PM, operating an on-call model outside these hours. 36 on-call stations working the retained duty system, part-time staff who have primary employment elsewhere and available to respond via alerter at all times. In an ideal world, we would provide full emergency cover to the whole of North Wales all of the time. In reality, however, the picture is very different. This is a snapshot of one day last April, but in fact this situation is a regular occurrence. Our stations are indicated on the map by black squares, and the purple shading indicates areas that receive an emergency response. The challenge is ahead. Important decisions are therefore required to ensure we can continue to be here for our communities. We've worked hard to bring down the number of fires and resulting deaths and injuries, but we need to continue to work hard to maintain this level of safety. We are facing new risks which we need to address by changing where our firefighters are located. These are risks such as those arising due to climate change, leading to an increase in the frequency and severity of wildfires and flooding. Advances in technology such as solar panels and electric vehicles also pose new risks to our firefighters. At the same time, we work hard to recruit and retain our on-call firefighters, but we need to be certain of being able to provide a response crew within the optimum response times across the whole of North Wales. Delivering value for money. Our fire authority is made up of representatives of the 6 local authorities in North Wales and has the power to raise a council tax levy for funding. Our current budget for 2023-24 is £44.4 million, which equates to £63.07 a year per head of population in North Wales, or £150.66 a year per household. If we did nothing and didn't change anything, the cost of our services to you, the public, in 2024-25 would be £44.4 million, with an additional £6 million we know we have to find to meet future costs. What are we consulting on? Option 1. By changing the emergency response model in Rhyl Deeside to day crewing and using our whole-time rural firefighters, we could improve emergency cover by creating 3 additional day-staffed fire stations. The cost of our services to you, the public, would be £44.4 million, with an additional £6 million we know we have to find to meet future budget predictions. Option 2. By changing the emergency response model in Rhyl Deeside to day staffing and using our whole-time rural firefighters, we could improve emergency cover by creating 3 additional day-staffed fire stations. We could also save some money by removing one of our 3 fire appliances from Wrexham. This would cost £44.4 million, with an additional £4.9 million. Option 3. Or we could save more money but reduce emergency cover by having just 2 additional day-staffed fire stations and closing 5 on-call fire stations, which would cost £44.4 million and an additional £3.6 million. Our promise: we won't make any decisions on our future plans until we receive all your feedback, and we're keen to hear from everyone in our communities to make sure no voices go unheard. Whatever option we choose, we have the highest commitment and duty of care to our staff, and all the decisions made following the consultation will be made to minimise the impact on our people. There is much more information on our website and in our printed leaflets, as well as all the details on how you can take part.
Thank you very much indeed. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, if I may, is it possible to show the slide, please, with the 3 options set out separately? Excellent, thank you. We hope that you found the video informative. What we would like to do is take a couple of minutes just to work through each of those individual options and consider them from a range of perspectives. The member-led working group met on a number of occasions between February and July. I think what's really important is to recognise the options that they considered but didn't progress through to the consultation. And in particular, the first one was a standard continuation budget, recognising that we could carry on with the service delivery model as it is, but the members felt, given the significant pressures that we are experiencing on emergency cover, that that wasn't an option that they could support. The second option that they considered but didn't progress was actually building a growth model beyond the continuation budget of £6 million. And in both of those cases, they didn't feel that that was something that they wished to go out to consultation on. So the options that were available were the 3 that you see today and the 3 that have been articulated within the video. In terms of option 1, I'd just like to recap very briefly. Option 1 is about Rhyl Deeside, moving from that 24-hour model through to a day crewing. And what that would do is put them on the same footing as we currently have in both Llandudno and Colwyn Bay. Alongside that, the staff redeployed from those stations would be utilised to staff 3-day staffing stations in Corwen, Dolgellau and Porthmadog. The impact for that on our staff would mean that although staff would have to move, there wouldn't be any change to the staff numbers that we have, either the whole-time staff or the retained. And that would increase the number of households within the 20-minute response by over 2,100. In addition to that, the prevention and protection work that we undertake in our communities, both with businesses and also those who are vulnerable, would increase. And that would be because those day staff stations would be able to access their communities. That's on par with a continuation budget of £6 million and would be a cost per household, not a cost per person, of just over £171. Option 2 reduces the budget slightly, but moves Frill and Deeside to a day staffing station, and that's where staff will come into work for a 12-hour shift. It also removes a whole-time pump from Wrexham, but again, redeploys staff into Corwen, Porthmadog and Dolgellau. That does reduce our staff by approximately 22 whole-time firefighters, which is about a 12% reduction. It's anticipated that that wouldn't be achieved through redundancies, it would be achieved through natural wastage. And whilst that does increase the number of households within scope of that 20-minute response time, it increases it by 321 only. There is still, however, the benefit from the prevention and protection work, as those day staff stations will be able to support those communities. And the cost per household for that option would be £167.29. Members also asked for a third option, and that recognises the financial challenges that the public sector is facing. That third option does again move Frill and Deeside to day staffing, removes the appliance from Wrexham, but only increases the day staffing stations in the rural areas by 2, and that would be within Porthmadog and Dolgellau. In addition, it would require the closure of 5 retained stations, namely in Abersoch, Beaumaris, Llanberis, Cerrig and Conwy. I think it's worth noting that the Chief Fire Officer, has outlined her concerns with this option and isn't one that she feels personally she's able to professionally support. That would reduce our whole-time contingency by 36, but also results in a loss of 38 retained staff. And due to the nature of where retained staff live and work, that can only be achieved through redundancy. In addition, that reduces the number of households across North Wales that are within that 20-minute response time by almost 2,100. There are still some benefits through the day staffing station to the prevention and protection work, and the cost of that is £162.88 per household. So I think it's really important to go through those options, and both Stuart and myself are really happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive run through and really informative slides. Right, members, questions? Oh, you never let me down, do you, gentlemen? Okay, well, Sean first, and then Councillors Paul and Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. If option 3 isn't considered safe and it's not agreed by the by Dawn said herself she's not happy to do it, the Chief Fire Officer, why has it ever been put on the public consultation? Because I believe she didn't want it there. That's one question. Between option 3 and option 1, there's 4,000 less people get attended within 20 minutes. And on top of that, how will the new 20 mile an hour affect this timing, which obviously every minute is possibly a life saved? My second question is, every option that's being put forward involves an increase in our contributions. Obviously, in the cost of living crisis, we know this is a problem. But downgrading of fire cover for some of the communities involved. Therefore, why are the public not being given the option to maintain and improve the fire cover across the area, which I know the public consultation in Conway, that's what the public wanted at the time, and it was brought up. My worry is not enough of the public are being given the chance to be involved, because most of them, especially the elderly who are more likely to be at risk in a fire, are not online, and that is a big worry for me. The consultation I know is tried its best, but I don't feel that enough of the public right across North Wales would, if you ask them, know about it. Many of my neighbours didn't know anything about the consultation. Other areas have told me the same thing. They haven't been widely attended as well as they would have expected, but the timescale, they didn't have enough of that time in that. And my other question is, has it been looked at, the fire service, like all our organisations, are top heavy and have cuts been made across there? Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's comprehensive questions, Councillor Sean. If you'd like to pop your microphone, lovely, thank you.
Sorry, I'll try to answer the first couple of questions, and then Helen will come in with the other ones that follow, and hopefully together we'll answer all of them. So why is it there? Why was why is option 3 included in consultation when the chief's made it clear that she doesn't support it? I think from the outset we started this piece of work to try to improve operational availability across North Wales. It was about providing that fair and equitable response across North Wales. But I think that the fire authority members, and this is a member decision, not an officer decision, I think the fire authority members felt that with the economic climate being as it was, that it was only right and proper to include an option that saved some money, and the kind of money that needed to be saved could only be achieved by including options that included station closures. So the authority members wanted to consult the public on that. I think that it's been very clear from the consultations that have taken place in those station areas what the strength of feeling is from the public in those 5 station areas, and that will certainly be taken on board by fire authority members when they reconvene to debate this issue going forward. So that's why it was included. It was felt that it was right and proper with the current economic climate to include options for reduction. The difference between 3 to 1, I agree that there is significant difference between the availability, and because of the fact that option 3 doesn't provide an improved response within that 20-minute response time that we were trying to improve, and doesn't provide additional response to more households. That's why from professional response from officers is that we did not support option 3 from the outset. So that's a question for fire authority members going forward. In terms of the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, obviously that's a complex subject in its own right, with lots and lots of opinion and debate on that we're very aware of. We did provide a consultation response in relation to the 20-mile-an-hour response when it was being debated, and we provided information around what that would mean for reduced response times for our on-call firefighters. Of course, whole-time firefighters, we have exemptions. When we are in the fire engine, we can exceed speed limits, but when our staff are responding from their home address or from work to the fire station, then they do have to apply to those 20-mile-an-hour restrictions. So we did provide feedback and made our representations, but ultimately, we have to apply the law, and you're quite right, it will have an impact on response times. Do you want to pick up from the next one, Tom?
Thank you. I think it is important to note that we have undertaken the consultation, and I would acknowledge that not everybody is online. As an organisation, we've engaged with the Consultation Institute to be guided in terms of whether our process is fair and reasonable. Notwithstanding the fact that we do know that everybody isn't online, we have held public engagement events, and they've generally, where the communities are affected, been really, really well attended. In addition to that, we've we've had a significant response to the extent that the Consultation Institute has said it is quite exceptional, the level of response. So it's very difficult to say whether we've reached all of the communities, but I think it's fair to say that we've reached a fair number of people, and we've made it as available as we possibly can. I think it's always fair. You always recognise that there are other things that you could do, but I'm comfortable that, I guess, or I'm hopeful that we've followed a reasonable process. And the literature has been clear. Our literature has been available online. We've had written formats of literature. We've gone to events such as the Denbigh show, the Anglesey show, the Eisteddfod, Cerrig show. So we've attempted to attend events and provide that literature in both the detail, the summary, and also sort of a readable format. So it's very hard to know what else we could have done given the timescales that we were working to.
Can I just add before you come on to the next question?
Okay.
I'll get used to it in a moment. I'm sorry. Can I just add in relation to that particular point as well? I think that the level of response that we already know we've received in terms of numbers is unprecedented for a fire and rescue service consultation of any kind. We've had more than 10 times what we would normally get to a consultation, and in addition to that, the concerns in relation to summer holidays and the ability for councils to debate this properly, like we're doing tonight, and have time to feed back, has been taken on board from the feedback that's been given during the consultation, and as a result, the consultation has been extended till the end of this month.
Thank you. You also asked a question in relation to, I suppose, the organisational structure and why this is largely impacting on those operational staff. At its inception, the emergency cover review was about the way in which we provided that emergency cover, the way that we supported our communities, and that's very much at its core. Inevitably, there is a financial consequence, but at that material time, we were very early in that planning stage for the 24-25 financial year, and the working assessment of that would be a continuation budget of £6 million. It's fair to say that that budget work is now happening at pace and in detail, and every opportunity will be taken not only to look at the operational staff, but to look at all staff costs across the organisation. And as part of that, we've established a member-led working group, and that's got responsibility for budget scrutiny. It'll meet on 4 occasions between October through to November, and its remit is to look at all areas of spend. That's payroll across our organisation, non-pay, capital and capital financing charges. So I hope that gives you the assurance that internally within the fire service, we aren't just looking at the operational model. We are looking across our organisation, but the reality is that pay is about 72% of spend. Of that pay, about 80% relates to our operational staff. So our capacity to make significant savings elsewhere is somewhat limited. And certainly when you look at our corporate services teams over the last 10 years, there's been a reduction of about 12% already. So it is very difficult to make further reductions without impacting on their ability to support the frontline staff.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much for your answers. Matt, just from an individual point of view from Conway, is if there's a crash in the tunnel or on that A55, inevitably the bridge is blocked. And I believe you'll leave Conway vulnerable on the Conway station. The marina proved a point, because had the fire service not got there quick enough, it could have been a disaster down there. Luckily that day there was no wind on Saturday or whenever it was. And the fire service were there within about 6 minutes, which was amazing. And my real worry is that Llandin and Colwyn Bay can't get to us, and even Llanfyfechan if it's on the A55. And we are going to be stuck. Thank you. Thanks for your answers.
Thank you very much. We'll go next to Councillor Paul, I think, then Councillor Gareth.
Chair, can I just say that I may have to leave the meeting early because I've got a town council meeting to go to, so apologies for that. We are the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, and the reason you were invited here is very much in my perspective from listening to debates where we've been struggling with our budgets, is the concern about the levy and that the levy's impact on the council tax and the impact of the council tax on household budgets. So that's the sort of process, and the concern I think within that is which is exactly the same process we're going through. We know we're going to have significant council tax increases. We know we're going to have significant cuts and savings as we did last year. And it's going to be a very difficult process. So obviously if the levy is as reasonable as possible, that helps us in terms of the council tax increase, because we know we're going to have to make a big council tax increase. Some of the issues that I've heard debated is, in a sense, I've heard nobody saying they want to limit the operational service that's provided. I've heard no residents or anybody arguing that. Exactly as in your video, people are most concerned because of the climate change impact, both flooding and hill fires. Fortunately, this summer, you'll probably say the facts, but the hill fires or forest fires or whatever have been not bad this summer, but some summers, I know you've been on the hill almost the whole summer dealing with a fire somewhere. So I know how impactful that is. I think the other thing which lots of people are aware of, and you raised solar panels, and you also raised the issue of people with battery driven bikes and all of those, which are new risks in a sense for fire. But also there's a real problem about the degrading of infrastructure, both private and public infrastructure. And when it goes wrong, whether it's a household's infrastructure goes wrong, or whether it's a public infrastructure, a road or bridge or something, again, who do we call on? We call on the firefighters to help us in that crisis. So, I mean, there is a real worry out there, I think, about in residents, if cutting back any more, when they know, just like us, in terms of demand for our services, old people or whatever, the demands are increasing. So that is a very big challenge. I understand that. The other point, which I think I would raise here today, because it's been raised with me, is historically we provided to the fire service some back office functions, and for whatever raison d'etre, you decided to take those services in-house. And now I'm not saying that that means the levy is higher, or that definitely needs to be looked at again. But that is a concern that's been raised with me, is because it's an issue which is raised with me all the time about our financial distress. Why don't you amalgamate more back office functions across North Wales and try and achieve some cheap savings there? So it's one of those issues which I'm sure you're aware of and comes up quite regularly. But thank you for your presentation, and I hope those questions and thoughts are helpful to you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, so really good points in relation to some of the emerging technologies and some of the challenges that we face as a result of that, not only here in North Wales, but across the sector, because as and when new emerging technologies come to the fore, then we need to obviously respond in terms of our procedures, our processes, our training, our equipment that we utilise to resolve those incidents. And we've had first-hand experience in North Wales of the impact that can have on the A55 when you have a battery-operated vehicle that catches fire. And we are, along with other fire and rescue services in the country, working at pace to get ourselves in the best position that we can possibly be in relation to that. You're also quite right in relation to the impact of climate. and how we can have particularly problematic years. And you'll probably remember not so many years ago when we spent extensive periods up at Llantysilio throughout the summer period. And you're quite right, last summer was a little quieter. But what we're seeing now is not only here in rural locations, but in locations where there's that rural and urban interface. And you will have seen press around London and places like that, in areas that never really suffered from wildfires in the past, that now are having to respond to fires that are moving into more urban places too, with that urban and rural interface. I suppose that when you're describing how the impact of responding to all of that, I guess that one of the points I wanted to get across is that I think an awful lot of the public may think that there's a fire engine that's available behind every fire station front door, and that if they have a fire in their local community, that it's going to come from their local fire station. But this is the problem that we're trying to resolve. On an awful lot of occasions, those fire appliances are not available during the working day. And so that's what we're trying to achieve with a redistribution, rather than considering it to be a cut. It's about a redistribution of what we already have to try to provide that fair and equitable cover across North Wales. And I'll hand over to Helen for the other one, if that's okay.
Thank you. I think I'm going to probably start by talking about the transparency of our costs. And if there is one thing that's been achieved through the consultation, is that the public of North Wales are now more aware of what the fire service does cost. And I think that's probably going to be a challenge as we move into future financial years, so that when I get my council tax bill, and I'm a council taxpayer of Conway, I'm really aware of not only what I'm contributing towards the fire service, but what other services cost. So I think that's really, really important to us. And I think that's a challenge that we need to take forward. Just personal preference, because an awful lot of our staff actually work in public facing roles, whether it be our fleet department, whether it be our ICT. So they're so embedded in our organisation. But I do know that historically, financial services since 1996 was provided on behalf of the fire service by Conwy County Borough Council. At a personal level, I do support those opportunities, and my background is also the health sector, where we've moved to a shared service for our transactional services, and that's worked really, really well. So as a North Wales local authority shared services, I think it's something that we should all consider, and it's something that we should all participate in if it's appropriate to do so. I think what's also quite important is recognising that our financial services wasn't just about transactional services. It was about those professional elements as well. So back in 1996, Ken Finch was a Section 151 officer for the fire service, and therefore it worked really, really well because he'd got that oversight and control. He also managed the technical and the professional services. Over time that changed, and when Ken left Conway, it became part of the fire service. So over time we got that separation between our organisation and Conway, and it arose when we could absorb that work within our own organisation because we'd matured sufficiently. So certainly from our perspective, that isn't something that's created a cost pressure because we've been able to absorb that work into our existing staff. But I would wholly support, where possible, that we share the expertise and we share the resources, because that is definitely the way forward.
Thank you. And I'm sure all these things will be debated by the board members. And at the end of the day, we'll accept, because we have no option, whatever compromises are made. But I think I've no doubt your board members are fully aware of these struggles, because they're also members of our authority. So, I'm quite confident in the end we'll get to a point which may be difficult, but the facts lead to hard conclusions and hard decisions, and we'll just have to go forward on that basis. So thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. We'll have Councillors Gareth, then Harry and Gromway online.
Thank you. I'm speaking today as a Conwy councillor when it comes down to it. And, I think, and it's not for debate today, but just to get it out there, I think that you should be funded centrally by central government, and that you should have a skills-based board, probably damn sight less than you've got at the moment of all us councillors from all over North Wales sat there with our different views and different skills and different abilities. Also, a lot of the cost increases that you said you're seeing coming through are actually driven by government policies, in my opinion. You know, the 20-mile-an-hour limit, the drive for more electric cars, even the wildfires are driven by the fact that there's less intensive grazing on the mountains, there's rewilding and things like that, so the grasses aren't actually being cropped short by sheep, which then has that law of unintended consequences. There's additional costs for yourselves in tackling all these problems, but as a council we don't actually get any funding from the Welsh Assembly government to actually fund you for those additional costs. Now, as a Conwy councillor, I would say we need to have the cheapest possible option without closing Conwy Fire Station. But that's just being a little bit tongue-in-cheek and saying, look, being really local, that's what we need. I would like to think, you know, again, I haven't seen any figures, but do you actually produce benchmarking financial figures so that we can actually make some informed judgments on the performance of North Wales Fire Service against similar services and other services, so that we can see where the, you know, where the spends are, does it make sense, and also performance and spread. And I know it's difficult comparing apples with pears. And as a final point, I'd like to reiterate Councillor Paul's comments that, to me, I instinctively think that we should be sharing services, because if we shared, whether it's with Conwy or with another council, if we shared the finance services, then surely that would then mean that the audit services would be cheaper, because you could get the audit services from the same council and they would know how the finance systems work, so there wouldn't be so much checking and all the other bits and pieces there. And as I said, to my mind, is that we should all be working together to keep those costs and spread those overheads out. But, you know, if you're asking for some easy answers, I haven't got any easy answers as to how to sort it, other than that as a council, we have not got the money. And we have to make some life-changing decisions on social services and all sorts of things. Nobody wants to cut anything, and everybody wants to do the possible best. But the other side of it is, as a member, I would imagine when I get to sit on your board, I will want to produce you to have the best possible service, all singing and dancing, and the best equipped and best funded fire service in the whole of the UK. And that's where that, you know, conflict comes in. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you set out probably really well the external pressures that we're experiencing. They come from climate change, they come from legislation, so health and safety legislation. By way of an example, our firefighters are exposed to contaminations, and a big challenge for us is working to minimize those risks, but inevitably there's a cost consequence as well. I think one of the other external pressures that we have to also recognize is the cost of living increase. And for us, that's been really challenging in terms of pay settlements, because we are bound by national pay settlements, and therefore certainly last year and this year that's been hugely impactful. In terms of benchmarking, we do benchmark internally with other colleagues both in Mid and West and South Wales. We also work with colleagues around the UK, and I certainly sit on a UK-wide group that actually looks at what the cost pressures are, looking at the innovation and looking to see how people have worked to minimise those costs. I think it would be lovely in that world to say that audit costs would reduce if we basically had an umbrella. Our own experience of having seen both sides of it is that sometimes it becomes more complex to audit, because they audit the accounts of our organisation, but the information is held by another. So there's sometimes complexities there. But I think what's coming through for me is the need to continually review, monitor, and look for those opportunities. And certainly I would, our budget scrutiny working group is definitely going to be looking at those aspects. So I hope that assures you that we're we're not accepting that our costs are as they are and saying, well, that's just the way life goes. We do look at opportunities to reduce them whenever we can.
Intent, Councillor Gareth, thank you. Councillor Harry online.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll begin by saying very much agree with the points made by both Paul and
You're very quiet, Councillor Harry.
Oh, am I? Sorry, is that better?
Oh, there. That's better.
Okay, apologies. I'll start again. Very much support the comments made by both Paul and Gareth in respect of the need to share administrative and other back office functions as best we can. There was one question I heard Sean ask, which I'm not sure there was an especially clear answer to, and that's around the impact on 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. Now, I appreciate that there was an acknowledgement that the fire service responded to the consultation on the new speed limit and the impact it would have on their retained firefighters. I'd be interested in knowing what that consultation was. Is it a case that the fire service may not be able to respond to instances quickly, or is it a case that you will have retained firefighters who have moved outside of the time distance from their fire station, so they're not able to remain as retained firefighters? I'd be interested just to understand a bit more detail what the fire service response to that consultation was, and what, if there's anything they can say at the moment they think the impacts will be on them as a service.
Okay, so in response to the actual consultation, when it was some time ago now, I can't remember the exact dates, but it was whilst it was white paper and there was an opportunity for people to feed back. We certainly fed back of what the risks or the increased risks were from our perspective in relation to the time taken for firefighters to respond to the fire station in the event of an emergency call. We also fed back in relation to a perceived increase in volume of vehicles and the ability to move past those vehicles or freely through those vehicles when responding both to the fire station and in a fire engine. But as I said earlier, when in a fire engine, when responding to an emergency call, we have exemptions under the Road Traffic Act to be able to go over that speed limit. But ultimately that was the feedback. The impact, as you quite rightly say, does impact the time taken for an on-call firefighter to arrive at the station and therefore get the kit together and get onto the fire engine and deploy to the incident. There is an impact on that. It is an impact that there is, in some locations, a minute, maybe longer in other places. Your point in relation to whether or not we have had to part company with people because they're outside of a response sort of space, or they're too far away from the station because of the change in speed limit, that's not the case. In fact, we're looking to do the opposite in North Wales, actually grow the size of response areas. Traditionally, a retained service has had a 5-minute response time into a fire station to be able to respond to emergency calls. But utilising some data and some analysis to identify the numbers of people who reside within that 5-minute area from ONS data in relation to the age profile of those people who could potentially be recruited as on-call firefighters, we may not have sufficient people who reside within that 5-minute response time in some of our more rural communities. So using an evidence base to grow that to look at what 6 minutes looks like, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, even up to 10 minutes, because it may be better to have a 10-minute response time than to wait for a neighbouring appliance to come from a neighbouring station in very rural communities. So actually we're looking to grow that response time for the availability for staff who live in areas further away to respond to fire stations, to improve availability of those stations.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for
that. Thank you, Councillor Harry. Councillor Gromway.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me ask a question on the committee. And we did meet on Tuesday with the Fire Authority as the cabinet. And yes, I very much appreciate your presentation. I'll raise a similar question as raised on Tuesday, as why you don't look at sponsorship in the same way as the council has to look for sponsorship, because we are looking towards town community councils and other people for sponsorships to maintain some of our vital services that may well have to be cut unless we maintain that sponsorship. For instance, the CCTV cameras that Conway have an excellent CCTV camera provision, but that is largely due to town and community councils sponsoring those. We've just won a shared prosperity grant, and that's another thing I'm surprised that the fire authority, as I'm aware, didn't go for the shared prosperity funding to try and ease some of their financial pressures. But certainly, I think there is an option to look at sponsorship from town and community councils and other organisations to try and ease some of the pressure off the ratepayers in Conway. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the primary reason in respect of our core services is that we don't necessarily have the legal powers to seek sponsorship or to raise a charge. I think the reference to engaging in grant applications is something that we will be exploring, definitely in respect of achieving carbon neutral. We've already been quite successful with the Welsh Government in securing funding for electric vehicle charging points. We will continue to do that in respect of decarbonising our estate. But I think that is an opportunity that we need to exploit further in working with colleagues across the local authorities to ensure that we've got access to the grants that are available. So thank you to the councillor for raising that, and we'll certainly something we'll take on board and seek to maximise in the future.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mike.
Thank you very much, Chair. I apologise for being late. My wife had an appointment in the hospital with a consultant, which went extremely well. So pretty happy, but I'm going to be a little bit gloomy. Helen, I didn't get any letters of thanks when I raised council tax by 9.6%. Although you understand, obviously, when you get the bill and you see the levy from the fire service, and we get levies for like the national park, etc. I was at the meeting in Conway. And I think it's fair to say, there was quite an influence from the union there as well. But from what I saw, there was a lot of support for raising, the money that you need for the options. And in fact, there was I think, quite a lot of support there for saying, well, let's actually invest in the service as well, which would be even more money. So I asked the chief at that meeting about my preferred option would be that you actually precepted for the service. And I think from my feeling from that meeting in Conway, and I know it's a town that had a fire service on a fire station under threat of closure, and I know, so it was quite vocal about that area. But my view from that was that if you went to the members of the public and said, well, we're actually going to precept £20–30 more this year to invest in the service, I think you'd probably get the support for it. Whereas when it goes into the council tax, it'll just be seen as a raise in council tax. I will ask Amanda if, for example, I think we're getting an uplift of about 3.6% from Welsh Government for next year, which will equate to a tad over £6 million. Historically in Conway, we get lower than what they say that we're going to get. That could be as low then as an extra income of about 5.7 million. With population data from the census, another 200,000 probably will be taken off that. So we could be looking at a bit of extra income of about 5.5 million, if my sums are right. I don't know if they are. Should be. I was finance cabinet member. So really, I would want to know, what would the fire authority expect from Conway under that circumstance against the options that you're bringing in? And I've got a feeling it's going to be about £1 million difference. I don't, but that's a question to Amanda, and that's a message that we in Conway will have to put to the public and just say, look, it's just under 2%, or it's about 1.5% increase in council tax is for your fire service that we're all precious about. We phone 3 9s, we expect you to come blues and twos to us. So I'm wondering, Chair, whether out of this meeting, someone, I'm not on this committee, but I'm wondering whether someone from this committee could perhaps propose that we write to the Welsh Government and say, you know, why can't the fire service, fire authority precept instead of putting a levy in? And I think we can, because you've got to get it through law, through Welsh Government in order to do that. And I'd be a big fan of putting pressure on, maybe not putting pressure on, but putting our case forward that we need to sort of separate, like, and understand then that the police service, you pay this and this is what you get. Fire service, you pay that and that's what you get for it. Council tax, that's what you get. Because as it seems to me, and I'm sorry I'm going on a little bit, but as it seems to me, I've got to go to the head director of social service behind me and say, we need to cut your services. I need to go to schools and education and say, we could need to cut your services to balance the books. And yet the fire service is coming in here with perhaps a 1.5% increase in council tax. So I am concerned about that. But I do, you know, I got the message loud and clear in Conway at the public meeting. So I'm wondering whether we could do that. So my message really is I don't know how far I am with my figures, but we need to be clear on our communication plan and quickly. Helen, if you could tell me what was the cost when we worked in collaboration, yeah, and I'm sorry, I'll put you on the spot. You may be able to just write to me after. When we worked in collaboration, i.e. working, we delivered your treasury management, for example. You now do your own treasury management. I think you've got your own ledger, etc. now that you're delivering it through. What's the cost of what you're delivering now through treasury management? And I hear you're going to look at that, but what was the cost? You know, what's the difference in cost when we were working in collaboration with Conway County Borough Council, delivering that service for you, to when Ken finished and you've gone on your own? So it'd be interesting to look at what that different figure is. I do apologise, I'm not part of this committee, but as I say, thank you for allowing me to speak, Chair. And if Amanda could answer that.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chair. So as you say, I think the published uplift in AEF, which was published in March March this year, should I say, in the context of an anticipation of an uplift in the settlement for 24-25. I think at the time was 3.1%. I think just very recently, and since Mike, since you stepped down as cabinet member, we're getting indications that actually it's going to be significantly less than that. Using the forecast of what I am now expecting us to get in AEF, if you simplistically did a pro rata share of that across the levy we pay to fire currently, and equally because in fairness to fire, they legitimately are getting their funding through us in that context. So in the settlement, therefore, legitimately has a share belonging to the fire, and in that same vein, a share of the council tax we collect legitimately belongs to fire. So I think, and I appreciate these are sort of crude figures because we haven't got the settlement yet, but I think based on sort of crude figures of the settlement that I'm expecting, plus say for argument's sake an increase in council tax of 5%, then probably the share of that additional funding coming into us for fire would be 200,000. So to the extent that one of the options is, I think, the option preferred, obviously, by the public, and I absolutely understand that, I think the Conway's contribution, or should I say, Conway's increase in its levy would be a little bit over £1 million. So to the extent, therefore, that there's an additional £800,000 ask, then within Conway, there are two choices for that. We either cut more services by £800,000, or we increase council tax to recoup that extra £800,000 to direct it, therefore, specifically onto the fire. And so using our figures of around 680,000 for 1%, that sort of equates to towards 1.5%. So I think, I think it's an interesting debate about the precepts, and certainly, I know I'm sure Helen will come in and comment. I think it's something that my understanding that fire are interested in pursuing, because the difficulty we've got, as you say, Councillor Mike, is that it's not, we can detail it in our communication, We can state X amount of the increase relates to that, but we cannot levy like that. We can't present that on the bill. So to the extent there's a headline increase in council tax or Conwy, even though we can communicate that an extra 1.5% of that is because of fire and because of the public support and consultation on fire, absolutely we can try and communicate that, but we can't put it on the bill. In terms of moving to being a precepting authority, that does require a change in primary legislation at Welsh Government, and therefore, Welsh Government would have to be in support of it. Equally, all of the fire authorities across Wales would have to be in support of it. Helen may be able to comment on whether she thinks that that is supported across Wales or not. I don't know, but I guess if it is supported across Wales, and I guess if it's supported by North Wales Fire and it's supported by us and maybe the other North Wales authorities to move it to a precept, then it may well be a good idea, for Conwy to express its support for that as well. But as I say, unfortunately, that's the hard starkness of the figures. Thank you.
Thank you for that helpful intervention there, Amanda. Thank you, Councillor Paul. It's okay. Enjoy town council.
Thanks, Mike. I think I'm going to reiterate really what Amanda said. As a point of principle, my preference would be to have a system, whatever it was, that put transparency at the core of what we're doing. Because I probably share your frustrations, because I did get a council tax bill last year, and I know there's an element of that related to ourselves, but it still wasn't clear, because we're effectively, as part of your standard spending assessment, we're part of your AEF, and we're also levying you as well. So those constituent elements are just not clear. And it is prone to miscalculation and miscommunication through nothing willful. It's just very, very unfortunate. So absolutely. So I think you did ask what would the impact be for Conwy in terms of the various options. So if option one is accepted, it's just over £1 million. Option two would be in the order of 825. Sorry? 825, and option three is 600 and 6. In respect of the more detailed question around what we pay for financial services, what we pay for treasury management, absolutely happy to take that outside of the meeting and catch up with you about that.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you. Come to you after Councillor Dillon. Who have we? Last one now. Got Councillor Austin online.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Nâi roi cyfle i bawb roed i offer ar eu glystiau. Iawn, gai. Diolch dwi ddim yn aelod o bellach o'n ffrosg, ond mi ydw i yn aelod o'r awdurdod tân. Cwbl dwi eisiau gwneud ydy atgoffa aelodau ffrosg, ac yn enwedig y cynghorydd Gareth Jones nad o'n aelod o ffrosg. Jyst atgoffa, nid yn unig Conwy sydd dan bygythiad o gael ei gau o dan opsiwn 3, ond hefyd gorsaf Cerrig y Drudion, sydd wrth gwrs hefyd yn Sir Conwy ac yn cyflawni gwasanaeth yn yr ardaloedd gwledig. Na cwbl o'n eisiau gwneud, jyst dwi'n hynny i sylw, oherwydd da ni wedi clywed, a dwi yn cyd yn deimlo yn ddirfawr efo Conwy, a dwi yn bersonol yn gweld bod na mi fydda ni aelodau y gwasanaeth tân, yr awdurdod hynny lle yr cynghorwyr, mi fydd rhaid i ni wneud penderfyniadau anodd dros ben. A dydiom just yn, os fasa yr awdurdod yn mynd am opsiwn 3, dydiom just orsaf dan yn Sir Conwy. Ond mae rai chi ystyried llefydd fer soch, a fel y gwyddoch chi'n o problemau sydd gyda ni, a mi fydd hyn waith rwan efo'r gyfraith newydd.
Sorry, Councillor Austin, I think translation's just lost you then.
All right, okay.
If you turn your camera off and say it again, you're breaking up.
Well, do you want me to start from the beginning?
No, just
Ocê,
that
iawn.
last bit.
OK, reit. Na, dim ond eisiau atgoffa bobl, diolch jyst yn Sir Conwy, mae'n effeithio rhan eraill o Ogledd Cymru. A be mae'r gwasanaeth tân yn ei wneud ydy achub bywydau. A dyna dyn ni'n sôn am yn fan hyn, ydy achub bywydau a cynnig, neu trio cynnig gwell gwasanaeth. Os fasa opsiwn 3 yn cael ei ddewis, yna mae o'n golygu nid yn unig cau 5 orsaf dan, ond mae hefyd yn golygu fydd na rhywle o gwmpas 200-300 o gartrefi yn dod tu allan I amser o 20 munud. Felly mae o'n mynd I fod yn benderfyniad anodd. A di hyn ddim jyst ynglyn ag arian chwaith, mae o'n ynglyn â trio gwella y gwasanaeth. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Gareth back in, and then Councillor Sharon.
Only a quickie, just on the back of what Amanda was saying, and I appreciate it's a really difficult question, Amanda, but if we're looking at a 1.5% council tax increase for the council taxpayers of Conwy, is that pro rata for every council taxpayer across the whole of North Wales, or does the funding kind of not that simplistic, Amanda?
I don't know what your view is, Helen. I would say crudely, I would imagine yes, because the distribution across the 6 authorities is based on population. Obviously, it will vary subject to the level of council tax that each individual authority has. So whilst there will be some variation, I would have thought in a crude sense that it would be, yes, it would.
Yeah, I guess it's one of my frustrations that the standard spending assessment doesn't in any way reflect any demographics, so deprivation. It's simply per head of population across North Wales, and that's our levy is then discharged in the same way. What I would say is the cost per household that you see in the consultation is based on a Band D equivalent, so we've standardised it in that respect.
Okay, I was only prompted to ask because obviously our income per head from the Welsh Assembly government compared with Denbighshire, for example, is significantly less. So any percentage increases coming through on a larger amount is obviously in cash terms.
But the within the standard spending assessment, it's on per head as well, so it's the same basis. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Sharon.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. I've got 2 questions really. Regarding option 1, the additional £6 million investment, that would mean that you would be able to reach an additional 2,000 households within 20 minutes. Is that throughout the whole of North Wales? It is. If so, are there clusters in certain areas where you're unable to reach them in 20 minutes, or would that 2,000 be spread very thinly throughout the whole region? So, for instance, would it only be 2 or 3 households in each village or town or whatever? Thank you.
So I suppose it's what I'm about to say is probably fairly obvious, that the more difficult areas to reach are the more rural communities that are further away from our fire stations. And so having a guaranteed resource that's spread over a wider geographical area provides that guaranteed response, whereas at the moment we're relying on that pump being available, and that's very difficult to achieve on a day-to-day basis. I think an example I'll give is a week ago, last Monday, I looked at the availability of our fire appliances from retained fire stations prior to us doing any additional support. There was 1 fire station available for the whole of North Wales from a retained side of things. So we then deploy lots of things to try and bring ourselves back up to our minimum response levels of 18 fire appliances across all duty systems being available for the whole of North Wales. What this would achieve is a a far greater starting point of guaranteed response during the working day for those more rural communities. So it would be the areas which are the hamlets, the villages, the communities that are more isolated because of road infrastructure, because of proximity to nearest fire station and so on. It wouldn't be one house, you know, in every area. It's going to be those more rural communities.
Thank you. Sean. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Just a quick one. How much extra would the option for growth be that wasn't on the consultation, the fourth one?
I haven't got it to hand, but if you work on approximately 300,000 households, so for every 300,000 that we spend, it's an extra £1 per household. But it's really about the extent of that growth. How far do we grow, and when's enough, as it were, or how far do you want to take it? So, thank you, colleagues. Just it's.
So sorry. I remember the figures that were discussed at the time. So there was options that were considered for 3 additional fire stations, 4 additional fire stations, and 5 additional fire stations that would operate during the daytime. The model that included 3 additional fire stations was an additional 2.2 million.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got 3 quick questions before we close. First one, I've had a quick look, and I think you've got 6 senior posts, assistant chief officers. Is there a range of 6?
Certainly within our existing structure, there are 6 posts.
Yeah.
Currently, not 2 of those aren't filled, so we're currently operating with 4 posts within our principal officer structure.
And will you be filling those others?
I don't know that a determination has been made. Certainly, in terms of the principal officer posts, they would have to go to a full fire authority for decision. So I don't know if that assures you that they would be filled following engagement with the fire authority.
Thank you, because I understand, I think it's London and Manchester and maybe Scotland who've got much bigger populations. They only have the 6.
So can I come in and answer that? Sorry, I've cut you off there. Sorry. Yeah,
sorry. So I just wondered why it was necessary to have so many senior officers, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this, these kinds of things being talked about on social media, and certainly staff have raised these kinds of issues with us before. I think that there's a very real risk of measuring apples with pears here. I worked in Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, and I know how their structures worked. What you find in North Wales is we have people such as Helen, for example, who wear multiple hats. She looks after everything to do with finance. She looks after everything to do with HR and a myriad of other things. In services like Greater Manchester, you will have a director of finance. You'll have a director of people services. You'll have all these other directors that are very senior members of the senior leadership team. It's just their job title is different, and they operate in their individual silos. In North Wales, we have the job title, which is comparable across different duty systems, different backgrounds, but ultimately we do the work with fewer people probably than they do in some of these bigger services. So I don't think you can compare like for like between ourselves and some of these other services. It's a terminology issue rather than that we've got more than they have issue.
Okay, thank you. And one of the other ones was one of the other members I think touched on it. Are you expecting additional funding? I gather Welsh Government is saying that the fire service is going to help out with 20 mile an hour. We've heard that said by Welsh Government ministers. Does that attract extra funding?
So what's been offered by Welsh Government in relation to the 20 mile an hour is around education for people as an alternative to enforcement. And what they have suggested is providing funding for services across Wales for the three services across Wales to take part in a multi-agency team whereby the police would pull over people who are exceeding the speed limit, and then they would attend the fire station to receive some advice, education and training. That has not got off the ground in North Wales as it stands at the moment. I think that the police are looking to see how they could support that. but Fire and Rescue Service haven't received any funding as yet. It would only be for additionality rather than for what we currently provide as part of our prevention and protection educational activities. I suppose I would say that Welsh Government do provide already some grant funding for some of our activities. We have a Phoenix team around youth diversion and engagement and people who need some support there. A Phoenix programme which we run for young people, that's funded by Welsh Government. We also have an arson reduction team around sort of tightening up on particular areas or hotspots where arson may be a problem, and that is also funded by Welsh Government. They also provide some capital funding for some of our intervention equipment, smoke detectors and any other prevention intervention equipment.
Okay, thank you. And apologies to those members who, like me, super sensitive about the 20 miles an hour with our full inboxes at the moment. So, okay, well, that's all the questions. I think we are asked to note the report. Have we any additional? Are there any proposals any members wish to make? Councillor Shan.
Thank you. I'd like to take on Mike's proposal that we write. I'll let Mike word it probably more eloquently than I can, but I'd like to propose it.
If you'd like to just read out what.
I don't think I wrote it down. All I'm saying is
it's off the top of your head, then, Matt.
Yeah, basically, it's about, I don't know whether it's a leader or this council writes to the Welsh Government asking for them to consider the fire service being able to precept instead of levying. And then we can word it. I'm sure that letter can be worded accordingly.
Oh, we've had two. Great, thank you. Councillor Dill just came in there, so that's been seconded. So that's a proposal, and also that we note that we note the presentation today. Propose a seconder. Would members like to show on that? Show in favour. 1, 2, 3, 4 in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 online. Did Councillor Chris? I didn't see. Councillor Chris, did you? Yes, you did. Hand up, lovely. So that's 8. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Nope. That's carried. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to thank you both very much for this, and really appreciate if you could take back all these points from tonight to the Chief Fire Officer, and hopefully all those points which are of great concern to people will be listened to in the consultation. Thank you very much. Good evening, members. Thank you.